Hey, we've got a problem here.
So, what's the plan?
What's your plan?
What are your plans?
What's the plan?
What's the plan?
What's your plan?
What's your plan of action?
Plan.
What's the plan?
So, what is the plan?
Wait, I have a plan.
I have a plan.
I have a plan.
That's the plan.
I have a plan here.
This plan's gonna work.
Master Plan, Phase 1, Side A.
I love everything about your plan.
भाई इससे कहते हैं planning.
What's it say?
Well, it says, I love it when a plan comes together.
Welcome to the Young Person's Plan for the Planet channel. And welcome, Jenny Malala.
Thank you, Ian. It's great to be here.
Dr. Jenny Malala, I should say. We have two very special guests today, Dr. Malala and Dr. Ham, both from Australian National University, and they're going to be talking about the fun of science, but also science in action. So we've got a pretty fun program today. Thank you so much for joining, and you're helping me co-host today.
Yep, I'm really looking forward to it, and it's a first for me.
I know, we threw you in the deep end.
Yep.
You don't know what's coming next, do you?
Haven't got a clue.
That's how we like it. That's how we like it. So today we're going to be focusing on the combined part of the program, going through how we actually bring the plan together. So in the upfront video, it finishes off with, we love it how a plan comes together, and that's what we're going to be talking today about, how you build and bring all your work, all of your research, all of your strategic planning together into a plan that can then be delivered. So, well, I thought you might. So we're looking for your questions as well. So we want to know a bit more about you too. So you're originally from England?
That's right. I grew up in Birmingham, in the middle of England. If you put your finger in the middle of England, that's where it is. I have an Indian dad and an English mum, and Birmingham's very multicultural. It was a lot of fun.
It is very multicultural. I've been to Birmingham quite a few times, and it's very multicultural with the best Indian food. I can't say in the world, because we have our Indian team on video as well. We know where the best Indian food is in the world, but it's not bad in Birmingham, is it?
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we start, what we're going to do is what we always do, which is our acknowledgement to country. This is really important because it acknowledges that our Indigenous peoples in Australia and Torres Strait Islands have actually been our carers for country for over 65,000 years, and we want to acknowledge that, but also recognise that that wonderful heritage in Australia also moves forward to our Care for Planet, which is really what the SDGs are all about and what sustainability is all about. And finally, we like to recognise the elders of tomorrow, which is everybody who's watching this program, because you are the future of the earth. So we want to join together and respect and acknowledge all First Nations around the world so that we can all work forward together. So it's exciting. I love doing that part of the actual program. So let's talk about what we're actually going to be doing today. We're going to welcome, first of all the schools in, now it's Australia, Mauritius, India and Singapore.
Fabulous.
So we're in 4 countries. YPP News, Paul, who we met a couple of weeks ago, Paul's actually from Kenya, and he rang me yesterday to say he's heading back to Kenya to launch YPP in Kenya. So that's really exciting. Pimlico are heading off next week to Singapore to mentor our Singapore students in YPP. And Mauritius, our Ravi Gandhi Science Centre in Mauritius are heading to Japan. And the reason they're going to Japan is because they've just won the National Quality Award for all of Mauritius for the YPP program.
Fabulous.
It's really exciting. So we've got a little map at the end about how the YPP program is actually expanding internationally. So we can see that already. We're going to be then talking a little bit about the combined phase, and I'll take you through this and also talk about all the resources on the web to actually support that. Then we're going to be talking to yourself, Jenny,
Looking forward to it.
and to Saul about your work in science and the fun part of science as well,
That's a lot of fun. Yep.
and also about sustainability, because you've been doing a fair bit of work in that as well. And your specialty's reefs, is that right?
That's right. I'm a coral reef scientist.
Okay, so we've got a few reefs in Australia.
We've got a few. We've got one. We've got reefs around Australia, which include Ningaloo, and then we go up as far as Christmas Island and Cocos Keeling. So we have a vast swathe of coral reefs around Australia.
So when we were in Mauritius last year for the conference, we also started to look at their reefs, and we're starting to get some of the students working together and looking at how we can address some of the reef challenges.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, look, it is. And that's what you do, is actually look at the challenges we've got reef.
Yes, and my research focuses on climate change and pollution impacts. So I look at how what humans do on the land results in pollution, and how that pollution runs off the land and into our coral reefs. And then I work with managers to come up with solutions to limit the pollution and help protect the coral reefs for the future.
So if our students your brains, we should be doing on reefs in Australia. Should be
Absolutely. Please do.
great. Look, thank you, Jenny. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk the students through this combined phase. So what I'm going to suggest is perhaps if you go over and join Saul,
Sure.
what we'll do then is we'll go through this, and then I'll come over and join you both, and we can talk about the fun and excitement of science. Terrific. Thank you very much, Jenny, and thanks all for coming in and joining us. So let's just kick through to our next slide, which is about our prize winners. We mentioned this last time. The Ravi Gandhi Science Centre has just won the National Quality Prize Award. So that's pretty exciting. There were 50 different organisations competing for this, and the Ravi Gandhi Centre actually won it. And I also want to just mention again Rahan Rafael, who won the Bard Memorial Community Service Award in Victoria. So we're starting to see a lot more of our students and schools and organisations winning awards. So if you've won awards, let us know so that we can announce that. So it's pretty exciting what we're actually seeing coming out of the program, out of all of your work as students, as schools and as countries. So let's just perhaps also set the scene today with just our quote from Brian Schmidt, and this is actually the video, named after Brian, Vice Chancellor of ANU, because this is what Brian said about the actual program and about the work you're doing, that you are the designers and implementers of our sustainable future Earth, and we encouraging the work you do to contribute to this future is essential. So that's what we'll be talking a little bit about today as well, how important the role is for you in the future of our planet. And that's what you're learning the skills to do. So let's talk a little bit about building the plan. Let's go through to that next slide, and just, this is something you'll be familiar with, and that's the resources available to you. So everything I'm going to be talking to you about is backed up on the YPP website and also the quick guide. So these slides are taken from there, so you can go back and refer to those if there are things you want. That's got lesson plans, student and expert forums, examples of the work that's been done. This is the example from Mauritius. Alumni student, let me see, comments and inputs, as well as mentors and videos, as well as access to all of these YouTube broadcasts, which go out every month. So there's a lot of great resources. This is the complicated approach to what we're actually doing, which looks a bit complex when you first look at it, but it's not actually that hard. Those two forms over the left-hand side are all you have to develop, and we went through this last time with the build, basically identifying 10 things that are already happening in your ecozone under each SDG, 10 things that need to happen, prioritise those and turn those into an action plan, which turns into one of these for each of our SDGs. So everybody's pretty familiar about that, except of course our new students and schools who are actually coming onto the program. So what happens next? If we look at our next slide, this is the final result, the plan. And that, the reason we build the plan and we make it into a glossy is because we're then also communicating all of the things you discover and turn into that strategic planning framework to our politicians, to our community groups, and that's why we want something that looks terrific and actually conveys a lot of key information as well. So let's talk about the stages that you go through to actually do that. The first is the cover page. So we make page 1 really easy for you. This is simply a standard format, except that if you're starting to work on the South Australian plan or a plan for your local regional area, or maybe a plan for the Great Barrier Reef. So we now start to focus the plan as well as having a national plan, then we put that down here. Second page is really about how we drive the plan and how we explain what we're doing in the program. And the key strapline that's always worth keeping in business, you say there's an elevator pitch. You've got the boss of the company in the elevator and you've got about 30 seconds to tell him what you're doing before he gets to the floor that he's going to jump out, or vice versa. Now, I've gone up and down the lift about 10 times because I wanted to get my message across to a whole lot of people who kept jumping in the lift, but you don't always get that opportunity. So if you've got a strapline for what you're actually doing, it's empowering, connecting, and engaging young people in delivering the SDGs. So always remember your strapline, and that comes in on the second page of the program. Third page, we'll just jump through to the next slide, is our acknowledgement to country. And I've talked about how important that is, not only as an acknowledgement for all the work that's been going on for 65,000 years, certainly in Australia and more. We're still working out how long, and it could be a lot longer than that, in actually building a sustainable country and developing skills to develop a sustainable world. But it also sets a precedent in Australia for how long we've been working on what we're now doing, taking forward. So there's a wonderful, wonderful continuity here. So that's why we always include it as the first page of the Plan for the Planet. If we go through to the next page, what we've got here is a number of, let me see, comments from different people that you're involved in. Now, I know over in South Australia, they've gone back to the politicians to actually get quotes about the work that they're doing. And we always start in the preface to include a number of quotes, a number of endorsements, a number of letters of support from key community players, so that everybody knows that this is not just something that's happening in schools. This is connected with the community, whether that's at a federal level. And here we've got Professor Schmidt, who's quoted. We also have Graham Durant, and we also have one of our other Scientia professors at Uni of New South Wales. But whoever goes onto this page is entirely up to you. It can be the head of science and education in Mauritius. It can be whoever you like. It can be your local politician. It can be your local mayor. So this is a page that you have total control over who you actually get to sign in. If we go into the next page of the plan, what we have here is a vision. Now this vision was actually developed from all of the work that happened at the United Nations, and it became the Global Compact, and this was basically broken down and by the students in the first year and translated into a very simple vision for Australia. Now you can adapt this, you can link it in, you can have this as part of your program, but we always like to have a vision up the front of our plan because that's part of the strategic planning process. What are you actually trying to do? What's the end game here? And you'll notice that with any business plan that you look at, there's always a vision. So we encourage you to actually build a vision for whatever country you're in, whatever region, and default, you can use this one here, so that makes it nice and easy. The next page is your priorities. So once you've looked at all 17 SDGs, it's important to then set up a priorities page. We do 1 to 10, and that's really helpful because it lets us know and lets all the other teams know where the priorities are for your particular region. So once you've built your plan, then start to look at where your priority areas are. And again, the simple way to do that is use your prioritization matrix. What's most important, what's most urgent, add the 2 scores, top ones win. Easy. Next page is really about exactly what you're doing with that build. You're taking those 4 priority areas and you're turning that into a strategic plan for every SDG, which then makes building the book fairly easy because you've done that for every SDG. We assemble them all, and what do you know? You've got a strategic plan. Now, that's pretty exciting, and one of the wonderful things I find is meeting students at the beginning of the year when we throw all of the SDGs at them and say, you've got to work out solutions to those for your area or for your specific area of focus, and at the end of the year meeting them and getting presented by this. And that wonderful sense of, I've taken on the biggest problems in the world we have as a team, and we've actually cracked it. We've got a plan on how to move forward. So those components are really important in actually building out the plan, and they are, in fact, the core of the plan. Now, when people see that from business, from government, etc., 2 things. One, it's a language they're familiar with. So strategic planning is a way that we communicate how we're going to turn ideas into actions, but also it's a key skill that you can transfer through to the work you're doing, whatever you do after you go into, your career. So strategic planning is a wonderful skill, and so are the skills you're learning about building projects. So let's work onto the last page. And this is simply next steps. Now the great thing about this is you don't have to write this, we do, and that just plugs into your plan, and that just is an update for everybody on how the program is now developing, so that we'll provide that page, and that's the plan. That's the whole thing in place. It's as simple as that. And as I said, the wonderful part about that is your sense at the end of it of what you've achieved, but if you think about it in terms of bigger picture, and this is my background in strategic planning, what we're starting to do is get a picture for every region, every country, on what are the priorities and what are the plans for each of the SDGs. Now that's a pretty amazing piece of information that then cascades up. And last year at our Mauritius conference, we were able to get our students to start working on the first international plan. But the international plan translates down to country plans, translates down to individual regional plans, but everything is linked. And that's the wonderful part about strategic planning. And then out of those strategic plans comes projects. So all of our projects are then linked into a whole planning framework. And because we've been able to work with Curtin University and their platform, we're now starting to digitalise all of that so that there's access to all of that information that you'll have access to and be able to see not only the plans, but also the priorities for every region and how they all link up, as well as the projects. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of why this is so important. Let's skip on to the next slide because that explains it a little bit more. Because our other key is the mentoring. So once you've done this, the important part is the ability to then teach other schools, other students, other countries. We already have, as I said, Pimlico heading to Singapore. We have Kent Street, who mentored Mauritius last year. We have Colby in Victoria mentoring our Indian schools. And we have Brenda Bella, who are already, look or have strong links with our school in Redlands, who's just come on board. And we also have Kenya, who's coming on board. Paul's heading over there. So we're open to schools who are interested in mentoring. But the mentoring is a really important part because there's another saying which says the best way to learn is to teach. And you are actually the experts on how to build these plans, how to turn them into projects, and you are the teams who are going to be teaching other students, other countries, other schools as they come on board. So that's very quickly how it all comes together. So have a look at that. Have a look at the website. There's all the examples. Have a look at the quick guide. If you haven't got a copy of the quick guide, just let your school know and we can get that through. But that's on the website as well. So that's the theory part of today. But hopefully that shows you how easy it is to actually pull it all together. And I remember showing this to the CEO of, Mauritius Commercial Bank. They printed out 1,000 of these copies. And they went to or the Mauritian version, and they went to every CEO, every MP, and all of the major community organisations. And I got over there about 3 months after that happened, and somebody came up to me, not knowing that that had happened, and said, "It's really interesting. Everybody in Mauritius is talking about the SDGs." So it's a great way of promoting the work of the United Nations, promoting your work in what you're actually doing, but turning that into action. And talking of action, what we're going to do now is talk to Dr. Cunningham and Dr. Malala about the work that they're doing and the fun part of science. So let's switch over now and welcome Dr. Cunningham and Dr. Malala.
G'day.
Thank you both for joining.
You're welcome.
You're in the hotspot.
Yeah,
Hotspot.
I'm ready.
You ready? Terrific. And thank you, Jenny, for joining again today and helping with our co-hosting. So what I want to start with, because this isn't often the question that anybody ever asks, is, and I'll start with you, Saul, what do you reckon is the biggest fun part of science?
Am I allowed to do two?
Yeah, you can do two.
All right.
Yep. We're very flexible on this program.
That's good to hear. So I reckon the first one I'd say is that science has been my whole life, really. And by becoming a scientist, I've had an opportunity really to travel around the world and to meet...
I think that might appeal to quite a few of our...
and I've been to most of the places we've been talking about today, but not Mauritius, so I'm a bit jealous of that. So to travel the world, and then in these different places, I'm often interacting with people who've got a special knowledge of their country, and they say, "Let me take you to this fantastic place," because I'm interested in biodiversity conservation, especially. And they'll say, "Oh, I have to show you this beautiful place," and I get taken to these beautiful places, and I see fantastic nature in, in all its glory. I see fantastic animals. I see fantastic forests. And that, given that that's what I love doing, to have a job that has actually given me more and more opportunities to do that is one. So I reckon the first fun thing, that's kind of like getting to travel the world and see awesome things. And I think the other one is really a bit more particular to science. And that science is actually about discovering things. And Jenny, hopefully you'll identify with this. And this is a bit nerdy, so apologies for that. But when
You're a
scientist,
scientist, okay. We forgive you for that.
But there's a moment in science when you've been working on something, you're making observations and you get your data together and you're finally at the point where you're starting to analyse it, trying to understand the data. And some of the most satisfying moments in my life are where you look at that and there is this moment that we call discovery, where you see, you think, oh, so that's what's happening. And that's a bit hard to probably describe to anyone if they haven't had that feeling before. You know the moment.
The light bulb moment where
yeah,
you just
exactly.
go, I get it.
And then, so that's it's fun because you've learned something, but it's also fun. There's a sense of self in that because it was your work that led to that. So that's something I guess I just encourage people that imagine they might have a career in science. Be ready to get to that moment, and then you'll start to understand why people do it. And then related to that is as you start to discover stuff, then you have this kind of knowledge and that makes you interesting to other people. So then people come to you and say, you're an expert in whatever you're an expert in. I want to ask you this question. And so then you meet more people because they're coming to you as someone who knows things that maybe they don't. So maybe that was three things, but that's why I think science is fun.
That's okay. So I just mentioned at this point of time, none of this is scripted. So we don't prepare, we don't give you any background at all, do we? Just throw you in there. But what you realised, Saul, is that the first phase of the young person's plan for the planet is discovery.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep.
As it should be.
Absolutely. And it's all about exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
All about going in and discovering what's happening with the SDGs. And we don't give our students too much background. Yeah. It's all up to them to come up with the issues, the ideas, the solutions. It's all based on really rock solid research that they've got to do.
And sometimes when you're in that stage, I think, you learn things that you sort of think, oh yeah, I think I knew that. I think I knew that. But the exciting stuff is when it just blows your mind. It's like, I had no idea. And that's really discovery, when you come across something that you think, no, I didn't know the word, and now I'm discovering.
We'll talk a bit more in a bit because I think that's the fun part of the program, and then it's packaging, isn't it? Conveying those ideas. But we'll talk a bit more about that. I'm interested from your perspective because I know you've travelled a few places as well, Jenny. Tell us a little bit about what you think is the fun of science. What's your experience?
Well, for me, I became a scientist because I was doing all the things I love doing. And for me, I was at university doing an environmental science degree, and I joined the scuba diving club.
Oh, right.
And I fell in love with being underwater. And it was then I went, I want to know more about this. I want to see more about this. I had a lot of fun, I dived with some great people, and I just travelled the world scuba diving. And then what happened, I grew up in England, so I learnt to scuba dive in very cold water in a dry suit. In between my first degree and my master's, I volunteered, and I went to Belize, and I volunteered to dive on a coral reef project. And I fell in love with coral reefs.
That was your first time on coral?
That was my first time on coral. And it blew my mind. And I just remember the first time I looked underwater, saw these amazing corals, these colourful fish, and I think I grinned non-stop for a week, possibly. My cheeks ached from it. So for me...
After Birmingham, that must have been a little bit of a change.
Well, yes. We have a lot of canals in Birmingham,
yes,
but not so many coral
You
reefs.
probably haven't gone scuba diving?
No, not in the Birmingham canals, not recently. So for me, it's been following patterns and the joy, and just meeting extraordinary people as you travel and you work with them.
Mm.
Having the privilege to ask questions or go to stunning places or work in marine reserves or teach students in a research-only zone, that's an amazing privilege. And it's so much fun.
Mm.
So a lot of reasons.
That's really interesting. And then you've come back, you've ended up over in Australia at ANU, and so that's not bad either from...
From Birmingham to
well, that's
Australia,
right.
yeah.
I've lived over in the UK and the weather's a little bit better over here. Yep.
Sorry?
So what are you actually working on now? What are the areas of your specific focus? So you've taken that passion and you've turned that passion into a career, really. How so what are your students linked in with either reefs like the Great Barrier Reef? In Mauritius, we went and visited the reef when we were over there last time. I know in Singapore, also India. The whole area of life underwater is a critical SDG. So how are you approaching that and tackling that from an sustainability perspective?
Well, as a scientist, I think it's really important to work with people on the ground, not only the local communities, but also the people who are in charge of managing natural resources. I feel there has to be engagement and everyone has to work together. So the way I work in science is I will typically have a research question, and then I'll go to the local communities or the local natural resource managers and I'll say to them, look, I think this would be an interesting question to work with or an interesting problem to work with. Climate change impacts, look at the effects of water pollution on coral reefs.
Right.
So if the local managers and the local communities are interested in working with me and helping to see if we can work out any solutions or improve the situation, we go from there, and we often come up with, first of all, we want to know what's wrong. That's important. Is there a problem? First of all, there may not be. And I've been working on so I've been working on mining impacts and runoff impacts on coral reefs recently on Christmas Island. And I've also been looking at agricultural runoff on the Great Barrier Reef. So in the 1800s, a lot of Europeans came over to Australia and they introduced European-style farming practices which weren't brilliantly suited to the wet tropics in Australia, and what that has resulted in is a lot of soil erosion and a lot of fertiliser runoff onto our nearshore reefs. And the research I've been conducting in, say, the Caribbean and in Australia shows us that coral reefs in polluted waters are ill. It's a bit like you eating polluted food. You will feel ill, and then when you expose them to another stressor, such as heat stress, they find it harder to cope with. And again, it's like a human having food poisoning and then you sticking them in the desert. So they have two problems to contend with. So what our research is showing us is clean water reefs have more resilience to heat stress. So just working out ways to help them be more resilient and able to react to the future problems we may have.
Right, so that's really interesting too, because it really talks about the interconnectivities of the SDGs. So life underwater, the life on land's related to climate change, related to energy, with agricultural use, food production. It brings them all together and they all come together on a reef.
And nothing happens in isolation. And also looking after your reefs. One person can't just decide to look after a reef, the entire community has to want to look after
It's interesting because one of the things we emphasise in the program is actually working as a team, and that's really what you're talking about.
It's hugely important.
So Saul, tell us about your career and how you've ended up in charge of Fenner School of Sustainability. Tell us a little bit about how that's developed as well.
So I've always been interested in sort of wild nature and beautiful places, as I suggested in your opening question. So I guess I got interested in really biology, understanding plants and animals, and I was good at that. And so that interest took me through to a science degree, and I didn't really know, I didn't have a particular intention with that science degree. I don't know if you were like this, but I just did it because I loved it. I guess, you know, I thought it was fun. And then I was encouraged to think about maybe not just staying in Melbourne, Australia, where I grew up and where I was studying, but to look at travelling overseas to get a bit of broader experience, to do a higher degree. So I did that, and I continued to love it. I went to the United States. I continued to love it and continued to be kind of good at it. So
which supported your travel ambitions
and it
as
supported
well.
my
Yep,
travel
absolutely.
ambitions. And in fact, I worked in Costa Rica, just near Belize. That was one of the places that really opened my eyes outside of Australia. So basically, I discovered that I loved doing the science and I was quite good at it. And I just incrementally, I became a researcher when I finished my degree. Job, probably the most important move in my career then was I got a job with the CSIRO in Australia. So it's a large government-funded organisation that really wants to support applied research. So not just research, because it's interesting, but research because it solves problems.
Research that makes a difference.
Research that makes a difference. And that actually, for me, was a really important change to how I operated, because I went from just doing it because I thought it was fun, which it was, to thinking, okay, it's good to have fun, but it's also probably good to make a difference. And so I really learned, and there's different ways of doing science, which you're really teaching through this program. You think about science a bit differently if you're trying to have an immediate outcome. So I learned in that to work, just as Jenny described, get to know the people who are responsible for different places, different areas of land, farmers, people who are interacting with the nature I was beginning to study. And then you get different perspectives, because instead of just the sort of, we call it blue sky science, where you just study to see what's interesting, you start understanding what are the problems people have and how can your science help solve those problems. And as I did that and discovered that that was a whole new level of being a scientist, I grew to really love that. I worked for the CSIRO for 17 years, continuing, and I got very interested in the work I'm still doing, which is the relationship between the conservation of nature,
Life on land,
loving beautiful things, and food. So the realization that
I think we've got a lot of our audience who are very interested in food as well.
I think
food.
food.
Yeah, but it's one of those
I don't know
things.
anyone who's not interested.
No, that's
in
right,
food.
absolutely.
But so there was that connection between love of nature and food, two things that were important to me, but I think important to a lot of people. And so in particular, working on pollination of our crops. So of course, many of our crops need to be pollinated, often by bees, and those bees are wild animals that live in natural places as well in agricultural places. So I was focusing on that kind of research, and then that led me. I had a bit of a change of career, as many people do, sort of at a certain age, and then I moved to the ANU, where I'm the director of a school that, in a way, if you look at what we do in that school, it's kind of like the school for the SDGs. Everything we do in that school is about sustainability, and so that's a different kind of fun, because I get to work with people who do different research to me, but all with the same ultimate objective, which is to lead to a more sustainable and more equitable world.
Brings out a couple of things which are really interested in and link back to the actual program. One is obviously that discovery phase, but also that passion. And I think that's something we always emphasise, and our students always come back and say, we thought it was going to be hard, but it was actually really good fun, and it's something I'm actually really interested in. The second part's that teamwork, how getting results is about actually teaming with lots of people, and that's one of the skills that our teams have really focused on. But then that last part I'm really interested in is the making a difference. And we learn a couple of things from the research we've also been doing on the program, how actually being involved changes students' attitudes, because we tested everybody at the beginning, we did all the right scientific things. And the first thing that happened was at the end of the first year, all of our students said, we don't want to stop. So everybody who does the program becomes an alumni, and they then can train other students, but you never have to finish the program. And everybody gets a alumni badge for the first year they start, and every year they actually participate. But the other thing we found is everybody said, look, the planning is really important. We understand that's a great skill, but we want to do things. And we had a wonderful school over in Western Australia, and one of the students woke up and said, look, I've just got to do something. So they set up this program called Rubbish Rangers, and they all got up every day and they had parts of the school, and they always made sure that they were caring for school. And I said, look, that's really great. How did it go? And the problem was the teachers coming up and saying, look, you're some of our top students. How come you're on detention? And then they could explain the program. So what we had to do is change the program for the second year. So now we have exactly that. So all of the students can now take their ideas from their learning and their discovery and their building the plan first year and turn that into projects. And that's where we've linked up with Curtin.
So there's a whole approach to research which is called action research.
Mm.
You know, so some research traditionally is by sort of observation, you know, watching something and taking careful notes. But some research is by getting out there and doing and learning by doing. So that's the way we teach. You know, we try to teach by, and you also teach students out in the field, don't you? You know, you discover that people will engage better when they're out and about. And it's also the way, it's not just about teaching, it's the way the best science is done, by getting your hands dirty.
Oh, look, it's really interesting. And I think you talked about discovery and that wonderful feeling. When we did our research, it was all about using strategic planning tools, and that's my background, and I get excited about that, but that's a bit nerdish as well. So we were just looking at, you know, whether that would make a difference. And all of our students kept coming back saying, look, we've you know, so we had all the data, etc. But it was the students talking, it was the action phase where the students were actually from feeling overwhelmed to thinking, I've got this, I understand it, to I'm going to do something about it, I'm empowered. And I think that was the moment for us when we discovered this is really making a difference to our students' lives. And so we've had to adjust the program to build in that action phase, and that's exactly what we call it, to build in that discovery phase, but also remind everybody all the way through that what this is all about is also having fun too.
Yep. Fantastic.
Look, thank you both very much for joining us. This is Science in Action. We can't hear you clapping, but we'll give a round of applause for Saul and for Jenny. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Jenny, I think you're going to come and join me to just finish off the program.
I'd love to.
Look, that would be just great. Thank you, Saul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Well, that was fascinating, and I always worry that we don't quite get enough time to go into everything, and I'd love to talk. I'm hoping at some stage yourself and Saul can come back and join us. And
I'd love to.
look,
That'd be really fun.
Absolutely super, and we'll link you into our experts part of the program so that students will be able to access yourselves to actually ask questions as well. Though the interesting thing is, what we found is our students from day one, who we threw straight in, you can see a student being thrown straight in the background there. No, that's not quite right. But it is symbolic. We threw everybody in and they came up with these absolutely fantastic results. And I think that's all about the scientific method, isn't it? It's called the scientific method, but it's getting involved in discovering.
Absolutely. Dive in there. Get your hands dirty.
And
students.
your
too.
career's never been the same since?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I wouldn't change it.
Snorkel?
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so about two more things. One is the skills we've talked about today. Just always remember, going from the sustainable goals through that process, production of the book, and then into the action phase, as Saul was talking about, we're focusing on key skills, sustainable development goals, learning all about those. That's why we do all 17. STEM skills, which is science we've talked about, but also mathematics, engineering, and technology. The research phase we talked about in discovery today. Challenge-based learning, which is throwing everybody in the deep end, and it obviously worked for you. Strategic planning, which everybody's, you know, sort of looks at me in the beginning, and at the end of it, how are you at strategic planning? And everybody says, fantastic. And we noticed, but then walk into any sort of career and say, I know how to plan 15, everybody will fall over because it's a real skill that you've got. Global citizenship, which is very much around what you and Saul have talked about today, which is working with people internationally, in teams, understanding different cultures. And I was really interested, you were both talking about how important that is in your careers.
Oh, hugely. And I've just met so many different people from so many different countries. And I love the new ideas they bring and the different perspectives they bring. And that's hugely important, that diversity of ideas and knowledge and cultures and bringing them all together, because everyone comes up with different solutions. I love it.
When we had our conference last year, it was fabulous because our Mauritians, we had 50 Australian students, 50 Mauritian students, and they said the most interesting thing, speaking, it was actually talking to the other about how they'd approach the SDGs, how the similarities and the differences in their countries. And the last one is really about action. The last skill is turning, exactly as Saul was talking about, turning all of that scientific understanding into action plans and projects to deliver the SDGs. Because when it comes down to it, the SDGs are our roadmap for sustainability on the planet. We're very privileged to be in this phase to actually have that. 10 years ago, there were no SDGs. This only came out in 2016. So we're really well set up. So they're the skills. It's always worthwhile just coming back and double checking why you're learning these skills, how they're useful for you and how they'll be useful going forward in your. So look, that's pretty much it for today. Let's just look at our next steps. All new schools, and schools can join at any time in the program. Initially it was beginning of the year, but now we've gone into international. We're finding our beginning of the year in Australia is not yours in England. It's the
as of September. In the
yours
UK.
is September, that's right. So schools and countries can join the program at any point of time, and the only thing you need to do is register through the program website and let us know all of the student emails. That goes onto a very secure website that then you have a personal access, and you can absolutely access all of the resources I've talked about today. Second thing is keep working on your plans and your projects, because when we have the conference at the end of the year, then we'll get our students to get up and talk about their plans and projects. It was the best part of last year, our program, is just seeing all of the different ideas coming together. And the last part is tune in next month to the Young Person's Plan for the Planet program channel, and we'll be talking about mentoring.
Oh, fabulous.
So I guess you mentor students and
I
you
do.
mentor and
I have a mentor as well, I should say. So I mentor people, but I also have a mentor. So I think at every walk of life, it's really handy.
So mentoring skills are really important.
Absolutely. And a mentor can be a peer. It doesn't have to be someone more senior than you, though it can be. But I also chat to my students. So even though I mentor students, they're my mentees, I learn from my students at the same time. So it's very much a two-way process.
Do you know Carlos Santana, the musician?
Yes.
Santana? Okay. So I'm reading his book at the moment, his biography, and there's a wonderful little quote that comes from that book, and it's him talking to his son about something, and his son says something, and Carlos turns around and says, "I want to be like him when I grow up." So you're absolutely right, and I've got to say that's been my experience with the programmers too. I've learnt so much from the students, and you really are an inspiration. So thank you. We're going to finish up there, but really appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to talking to you next time, and we might even be able to get you back to talk a little bit about mentoring as well.
That'd be very exciting. I'd love to.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.